Okay, so let me backtrack a bit. Okay, so this unit would be about breaking or leaping over or traversing boundaries. There are silos in our mind. The paradigm we employ when we are doing designing, there are a lot of silos. So this silo is trying to first to see what are those silos. Only then you will understand that there is a possibility beyond those silos. Okay. Okay, this is something I just cooked up recently, so don't. It's not it's not apa tu final. It's open to interpretation, but basically what we are trying to do, if you look at the diagram, we started off the most bottom part of, if you want to relate to architecture, normally we operate in operational silos. Okay, the architect thinks in terms of aesthetic, in terms of meanings and whatnot, and then the developer also concerned with function and economics and all that. The engineers are thinking about structure, the environmental service. So normally we face the problem of siloed thinking in this level, the lowest level, the operational silos. Let me open this. Okay. Um, so to overcome that, normally we employ what we call system thinking, to be able to traverse, to think beyond the silos, to bring together different experts, different concerns, different dynamics into discussion to come up with a solution. In our case, a building to provide for the use of the society. But within that, there are various silos that we employ that we would not we wouldn't realize. For example, if you are operating within a capitalist system or socialist system, or even feudal system, in some, even in modern times, there are still some society that based on feudal system, welfare society. So all these are also, it helps you to traverse uh, the various operational silos, but that in itself also have its own silos. And then if we go one step higher, we are talking about paradigm. This would allow you to traverse to a certain degree, a wider expand of your silos, so that you would employ various approach in thinking, whether you are positivist, constructivist, integrativist, whether you want to employ the idea of circular economy. These labels are actually interchangeable. It can go up and down, but for our understanding today, they can be grouped as such. Okay. And then beyond that, at higher level, we are talking about philosophical silos. If you adopt one particular philosophy, you would most probably likely will be operating within those within that philosophy. Okay. And higher than philosophy are worldviews. This goes to religion, spirituality, the way you view the world, the way you understand. It's almost like ontological discussion of what things are. Okay. So the thing is, if you are versatile enough to go higher on the chart, on this chart, you will be more versatile in your exploration. More, you would be able to have more creative solutions. Yeah. Architect should be adept at traversing horizontally and vertically. So we should be able to go up and down this chart here, and cross over between silos. So if you go downwards to a solution, there is a tendency what we call fragmentation and reductionism. But when you start, the idea should come from the higher realm, where integrative thinking, holistic thinking should be the basis of your approach. Okay. But as you move higher, you can see that the barrier becomes thinner. You can traverse between different thinking system, different paradigm, different philosophy. Okay. And you would realize that the solution for one particular problem can come from different compartment, and you can pick and choose which one would be more suitable for to give solution for your problems. Okay. So desiloing is try to traverse horizontally, to move in between the silos. Okay. Um, if you are able to do that, then your idea have bigger bargaining power with shareholders. For example, in a design, you can offer a different perspective in solving a problem. So sometimes when we are focused on a specific project, we tend to think that those are certain solutions are only within certain options, but actually we can have wider options if we think beyond the operational silo. Okay, this is an example of how Desilo thinking help in coming up with new architecture. Okay, if you look at this, maybe some of you know this airport. It's Stansted Airport, designed by Norman Foster in 1991. The story was about how to overcome a specific regulatory requirement. Okay, for fire protection, there is a certain building regulation imposed by the UK. It's called compartmentalization, where you must compartmentalize your spaces where you have certain number of people uh, for firefighting, to contain smoke and fire. In case of fire, it does not spread to other places. So that was the regulation, and the requirement was to have certain floor area. You must have compartmentalization. But the architectural idea of Norman Foster was to have this airport where people can see the sky where aeroplane departs on the other side of the building. So the idea is he want to have that very close connection with the sky, to reflect airport as an air transportation. So the sky should be visible to the occupants. So that was the design intention. Okay. First, because of compartmentalization, this idea became a problem. And secondly, normally when engineers they design for building with building services, they would put the services on top of the ceiling, where all the ductings will be covered by false ceilings. So this would interrupt the idea of having a view towards the sky. You can see that the trees, this is what we call the trees. There are openings. Diffuse light from the sky can come into the area. This is the predecessor of KLIA. Before that, airport was not designed like that. So what Norman Foster did was to argue for his case, that he was saying that if it is smoke and fire is the concern, there are other ways of solving those problems. So first, he introduced the concept of the trees. The trees, there are actually a suction fan on top of the trees. So just by the virtue of the height of the ceiling of the airport, they would first the smoke would need time to get down to the floor. So that is the first design solution that he argued for. Secondly, in the trees, within the trees, there are suction fans that would suck the accumulated smoke on the roof towards the center of the tree, and it will be sucked down out of the building. And the other problem for the building services facilities, he inverted it by putting it underneath the floor. So that is, he wanted so much this idea of having free flow space, open space where you can view the sky, that he had to overcome those barriers by arguing over the regulation. Is also the metaphor of compartmentalization. Okay, so this is when architects normally design, they are restricted by certain regulation and requirement by different silos, different department, and different needs. By understanding what are the concern of those other silos, you might be able to offer a solution that results in the design solution might be what you want in the beginning. Okay. So now we are coming on into the discussion of industrial society. So to do that, we need to understand where it began. So we have to go back quite a number of years to look at what happened during the modern civilization that give rise to this industrial society. Okay, in the past, before the rise of industrial society, architecture has always been the main force behind architecture has been always um, the power authority, either the king, or the lords, or the owner of the land, okay, the emperor. They were the one that commissioned what we call architecture. But remember, during this time, architecture still happens among the masses, but that is what we call vernacular architecture. But in the past, mostly major architecture, the architecture that make impact or signify the civilization, is being commissioned by those who are in power. Okay, even religion was another prime design generator or prime mover for a monumental or public architecture. Okay, and then we came to a time where religion and politics become embedded together. It became the symbol of power, where Christianity with its Saint Peter's Basilica, even the Blue Mosque, the Byzantine Empire, and then later on it became the Blue Mosque after it was conquered by the Muslim. But the thing is, politics and spiritual authority also became a dominant forces that shape the progress of architecture. Okay, and then something happened in the 18th century. Um, People other than kings and royals and clergy and priests also have begin to have the resource to have notable architecture of their own. Now, individual with enough money can have almost like a palatial style architecture to express their status and their wealth and whatnot. Okay, this is due to the rise of the what we call merchant class, people who makes a lot of money from not merely from inheritance of their predecessor, but now they make money out of their own enterprise. This is the merchant class. It begins in Europe, in Venice, in actually in uh, any place around the world. Where you have merchant class, they would have the ability to purchase or to commission architecture that reflect their status and power. Okay. All right. And then something happened in the 18th century. Industrial Revolution happened. Okay. For this talk, we look at Industrial Revolution and how did it affect architecture, and how in turn architecture uh, create or cater for the rise of industrial society. Okay. Okay. Sometimes in the 15th to 7th century, in Europe, they were very much into what we call age of exploration. Okay, it begins with European powers. The princes and the king, they start to have their own empire or state or country, but they want to have dominance in among themselves. So first they started to go to other parts of the world simply because they want to find new products and new materials, new resources, so that they can trade and they themselves become wealthy. Okay, and it was commissioned by kings. For example, Christopher Columbus. He was commissioned by the Spanish king. Okay, Magellan. We all heard of this name. They begin to look elsewhere other than their place for new products, exotic product, even resources to consolidate their power. Okay, and then there is a peculiar thing happen in Britain. That is the rise of scientific revolution. Okay, people like Newton, Plato, Bacon, these people start to introduce the idea of scientific approach to knowledge, to finding new ways of doing things through science, and they really appreciate the contribution of science. They have royal societies, just to show new innovation. They really encourage this. So what happened in Britain, they have this opportunity to translate this into technology and machines that would really give advantage to them over their rivals in the Europe in Europe. Okay. For example, in the early days, one of the machine that many people would attribute to the rise of industrial revolution is a steam power engine. It begins with this guy Newcomen came up with what he termed the fire engine. Actually, it used steam to move piston and levers to take water out of the coal mine underground. These coal mines were normally flooded, so they need a good way to a quick and efficient way to take out the water so that they can continue to mine the coal in the ground. So when with machines and ideas like this, they really achieve the efficiency comparable uh, comparable to the traditional way of doing that many hundred times over. Okay, for example, instead of using maybe 300 horses to pull buckets out of the ground, you can just use one of these machine to continuously pump out water out of the mine. And then you realize this machine can have other uses. It can be used to run mill, to run trains, transportation. So this thing really happened in Britain in great earnest compared to other countries in Europe. Okay, so this you can say that during this time, science become the engine of industrial capitalism. Okay, so something happened sociologically in Britain also when they start to introduce factories. Okay, before that, there is something peculiar happen in the way people live in England. Before this, people were living in exploiting what they call the common land, the commons, where you can make a living out of the land for free. The land is open. You can utilize the land um, freely to make a living out of the land, either by agriculture, farming, or rearing animals. So, and then in between 18th and early 19th century, um, the land become privatized. Now they fence off. Okay, they fence off the land, especially by wealthy landowners. Now you have wealthy people who can um, uh, who can create an influence with the way the land is being managed. They introduced the Enclosure Acts. So after the enclosure, they these free lands are not available for common people anymore. Okay, they have the right to fence off the land and claim that those are their land. Okay, so what happened? This created a large pool of landless laborers. Okay, so these landless laborers, they have no means of making a living, but at the same time, there is when the industrial revolution happens, they need a lot of laborers working in factories. Okay, so these landless people, they flock to cities like Manchester, Birmingham, where they have industrial revolution just about to kick start, and they need laborers, so they move in masses to the cities. Okay, so the enclosure movement effectively supplied cheap labor for industrial capitalism. So rural displacement result in urban migration and rapid growth of industrial towns like Manchester. So in short, the Enclosure Acts uprooted rural populations and drove them into industrial cities, okay, fueling the rise of the factory system and the new industrial working class. So that you can argue that this is the beginning of the industrial revolution. Okay, but the situation was not really favorable for those workers. Okay, um, the living condition was so bad because this is a new thing. The society has not yet um, come to the sense of how to deal with these labors. Okay, So the housing that they provided are overcrowded and unsanitary, and it was they really exploit these poor people by imposing harsh working conditions, sometimes 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And back then child labor was common. As young as 6 or 7, they work as scavengers because of their small body. This machine need to be clean. Underneath of this machine need to be swept or clean, so these children can go under the machine to help them. Okay, so because of this disease, pollution, and really harsh living condition become a problem. Okay, and even the pollution from the factories turn the air into unlivable situation. Okay, um, so I believe many of us have heard of this story. Okay, so if you want to summarize what happened was, with the age of discovery, these countries, the Western powers, start to have new resources. Okay, and new markets, even new goods. So that's their motivation to go and explore the world. Okay, so the new resources powered the industry. Okay, colonies provided cheap raw materials such as cotton, sugar, rubber, coal, and metals. So these they got this very cheap by negotiating or forcing or going to war or conquering other countries. So they have these cheap materials. So because of these cheap materials, and in the case of the US, the cheap labor from African slaves really powered the economy. Okay, so colonial markets absorbed industrial output. So even then, they would sell again their products to their colonies. Okay, so they get resources and they get market at the same time, and they make money out of it. Okay, so the industrial technology really enabled colonization. Steamships, railways, and weapons from the Industrial Revolution allowed empires to penetrate deeper into the colonized territories, extract resources faster, and control larger populations. Okay, and at the same time, financial and institution uh, organization start to become to be crystallized into what we call today is financial institution, banks, capital accumulation, and this leads to the joint stock companies that really give rise to modern corporation and modern capitalism. Okay, so we could see that through this evolution of society, so the industrial society was born. Okay, so architecture really played vital role in accommodating these changes. Okay, of course, factories are the most common form of industrial architecture. It begins when industrial revolution provide factory efficiency, so they need factories. So it begins again in England, and these factories are new buildings actually. Architect has to think how to provide spaces, big spaces to accommodate big machine, rows of people working together. So they have to really think of how to provide these open spaces using steel and new materials, because in the past they used to build with stones and timber and it was not possible, so they have to find new ways. So architects helped in providing the solution for this. Okay, and then we have building like exhibition hall. When you have lots of products coming out of your factories, um, you uh, you need really big market. Okay, because to pay for the capital that you invest in the machines and all that. So what happened is you need a lot of market, and back then, even then, they realized they need to bring in other countries to buy their good. So they need they created the World Expo, where people from different countries come together to see what Britain has to offer. So they would buy it, be it weapons, new materials, and new conspicuous product. So they need spaces to accommodate big event. Okay, among the first uh, what we call steel and glass and steel architecture is the Crystal Palace. Okay, in London. It was designed by Joseph Paxton for great exhibition. This exhibition where people come from all over the world. So this is the place where Britain would show off its strength, its progress, so that people would really buy into the idea or even the products that they sell. Okay, and the rise of a shopping complex, even back then, even late 19th centuries, they already have arcade and department store. So these are new architecture. It has never been done before. Okay, and of course, train station. Um, train uh, they started with a steam engine, but they need stations. People start to use it as a mode of travel. So you need stations. So the stations itself is a display of architectural prowess of the designers and engineers. So they really work together. During this time, engineers and architects really work close together to provide the solutions for industrial revolution. Okay. So architects provide infrastructure for the industry. Okay, the first mill among the first mill in Britain was this mill, Cromford Mill. Okay, multi-story, fire-resistant with repetitive windows for daylight and cast iron farming. So now they really need the need for bigger windows is really crucial because they didn't have that electric lighting yet, so they need windows, big windows. So you need to rethink how your multi-story building be designed. Um, so you will have daylight and you will not want to use candles or whatever in your factory. Okay. And also these buildings mark a shift from craft-based workshops to mechanized production spaces. Um, craft Before industrial revolution, goods and products were produced by craftsmen. Okay, one craftsman will produce a chair right from the beginning towards the end. Okay, so based on individual creativity, individual skill. But with the age of machine, you only work for the machine, and the machine would do different parts. You assemble them together. Okay, so it's a different way of working with industrial revolution. And also new engineering came out of industrial revolution with iron, glass, and steel replaced stone and timber. Okay, this iron bridge was among the first what we call new technology introduced out of industrial revolution. Um, it's cast iron, and it's a symbol of industrial ingenuity. Before this bridge, all bridges were built out of stone and timber, perhaps. Okay, so this was among the first. Okay, and the name like Brunel, Paxton, and Telford was the star heroes of that time because they used new technology to solve new problem in new ways. Okay, but then again, there is something happened in the social realm. Okay, um, factory requires efficiency, control, and profit. So the factory layouts optimize labor and machinery flow. Okay, so similarly, they need new houses for these people. So they sort of use the same mentality. So the spaces need to be streamlined, needs to be uniform, needs to be to have this replication, easy to replicate. So new type of housing came out of this industrial revolution. Okay, so architecture responded to that by um, designing these houses with capitalist rationality. Okay, and at that time, the bosses are very particular about discipline, specialization, and they want to see their workers do their job. Okay, so those are the new culture of work in after industrial revolution. Okay, and the town itself became faced a new problem. Okay, now they have population explosion. Okay, so again with the scientific approach of efficiency, of course, grid-like repetitive housing blocks, uh, coming out of standardization and mass production mentality, you have these rows and rows of identical houses. Okay, but pollution, overcrowding, and lack of planning still become a problem that haunts this new type of architecture. Okay, let me before I sorry. So with Crystal Palace, okay, something else also happened. Okay, it was not only functional, but it became the symbol of power. Okay, the symbol of power of Britain, the symbol of power of new technology, the symbol of power of new way of thinking. Okay, uh, if in the past it was palaces, mosque, cathedral, or emperor's residence became the hallmark of grand architecture. Now banks, train stations, exhibition halls, it glorified the progress of the empire. Okay, um, and also give rise to a certain group of people we call bourgeoisie. I don't know really how to pronounce it, but these are the group of people who make money or create wealth out of the new venture from arising out of industrial revolution. Okay, so that brings us to the industrial society. So we will now look at what happens to the society and how did architecture respond to that. Okay. All right. The Industrial Revolution, roughly in mid 18th century, transformed how goods were produced. But over time, it also transformed how people lived, thought, and organized society. When this transformation became widespread and self-sustaining, it gave birth to what we call an industrial society. So, industrial society is some have some specific characteristic. First, the production shift to social reorganization. Okay, pre-industrial society was agrarian. Mostly they were farmers. Okay, animal rearers. Okay, uh, production was the main concern of production was for food and then for clothes and whatsoever. But uh, farming was the backbone of the production before industrial society. Okay, then the Industrial Revolution introduced machine-based production in centralized factories. This shifted economic base from agriculture to industry, marking the start of the industrial mode of life. So now, uh, before Industrial Revolution, it was perhaps 90% of the people worked in farms, in food production. Okay, but after Industrial Revolution, this number came down to probably only 40%. But then, uh, food was produced with scientific efficiency, so it can cater for the need of the 60% of the population. Urbanization became a new design problem. Okay, how to house these people. Okay, and these people live by wage system, not subsistence farming. So for food, they have money to buy, but to get money they have to work in a factory. So that was the first major change in the society. Okay, the city replaced the village as the center of life. New urban working class, the proletariat, and new industrial bourgeoisie, the capitalist. Okay, so you start to have these two class of people. Okay, the workers, the farmers. In the past it was the farmers, now they are the workers. But we have now the capitalist people who have the means to acquire the resources to start a factory, to start a business, so they can employ these people. One thing, it the effect of industrial revolution to the concept of works has also changed the society quite a bit. Okay, in the past, if you are a carpenter, you would produce a chair or a cupboard from start to finish. You would see the birth of your product right from the beginning to the end. Okay, you in one sense you have the sense of control and power over how things are produced. Okay, but After Industrial Revolution, people work on specific focus. Maybe, for example, if a chair, you only work on the legs of the chair for 12 hours a day. And another group of people would work on the back of the chair or the upholstery for the chair. So in a sense, people have lost this sense of empowerment of having pride and control over the product. You know, they just sometimes these workers don't know what they are doing. They were just asked to do something to turn a block of material into a certain shape, and then you pass it to the next line of production. So in a way, you have you lost the sense of control and power over production system. Okay, so this way of working also, people argue that it spills over to the way education and other parts of life are being run, being organized. Okay, specialization and efficiency. Okay, it provide design generators for architects, so they design factories almost in similar manner the way you design your classroom and lecture halls. Yeah, people have to sit for hours doing specific things, learning specific items for specific amount of time. Okay, and I should have added another photo where people work in offices also in similar manner. Okay, so this is what the manifestation of industrial society looks like back then. Okay, so what is industrial society? So there are quite a number of definitions, but they don't differ much from one another. For example, Giddens was saying an industrial society is one in which the main form of productive activity involves the manufacture of goods using inanimate raw sources of energy, such as machines powered by fossil fuels, and where most of the population works in industrial or service occupations rather than agriculture. Okay, so one of the keyword here is inanimate sources of energy. This can be fossil fuels, can be renewable energy whatsoever, but it powered machine. So you are not using human power anymore. Okay. Uh, Another definition is a society organized around the principle of economic growth through industrial production, characterized by the predominance of manufacturing, factory labor, and the application of scientific and technical knowledge to production. Here, there's another word which would be can be a title for another lecture. You know, the economic growth, that is something coming out of capitalism. eh? The, uh, the economic structure that coming out or also influencing the rise of industrial revolution. Okay? The focus on growth resulting in the concept of surplus, concept of consumption and waste and all that. But that's for another day of discussion. Okay. So key characteristic of the industrial revolution of the industrial society is mechanized production, reliance on machines and energy sources, coal, steam, electricity rather than human or animal labor. Urbanization, population concentrated in cities around industrial centers, and wage labor system work becomes specialized, contractual, and monetized. In the past, if you are, for example, you are a carpenter, um, you would make money if you make a lot of chair, but you can also decide, okay, this week I have enough money for a month, I would only do one chair a week. Okay, so you can have that kind of control, or you can say that, this week I don't want to work, I want to go visit my relatives in other town, so I would not work today. Okay, and he can negotiate the price with his customer. Okay, now all this control and power over the production is no longer there when you talk about industrial society. Now you are represented by your time and your expertise in exchange for a wage, for money. So, and that is beyond, somehow beyond your control in the sense that when you want to produce, how you want to produce. Okay. um, Division of labor, like I said earlier, if you are a carpenter, you would work on a chair from the beginning to the end, but now you might just be working on a bolt, you know, producing the right bolt for a specific chair. You might not even see the chair in the end. Okay, and then the industrial society is also characterized by bureaucracy. Okay? The bureaucracy is based on rational, and this is again another lecture about the scientific management movement, okay, by Frederick Tyler. Okay, formal institutions, efficiency, and calculability dominate. Okay, it's a Max Weber theory of rationalization of works of organization of organizing society. Okay, and social stratification happens. Emergence of new class, the industrial capitalists, and wage laborers. Okay, this is the distinction given by Karl Marx. Okay, and then there is a cultural shift from traditional values to instrumental rationality and scientific worldview. This is necessary because you remember that when industrial revolution came, uh, products are produced in vast numbers. Okay, so you need to persuade people to buy these products. Okay, so the way they do is they do this is by persuading through rational argumentation that this product is needed, this way of life is the way forward. So there is a cultural shift towards meeting the expectation of the capitalist production. Okay, so there are many theoretical references you can refer to. Karl Marx talked about capital, and he proposed socialism. Okay, and then Durkheim talked about division of labor in society. Max Weber traced this shift in culture right from the Protestant ethic. Okay, you can go uh, later and read this treatise on the industrial society. Okay, Herbert Marcuse, one-dimensional man, is something that we will discuss a bit later today. Okay, use the term advanced industrial society to describe the stage where civilization in which technological rationality and industrial production have become instruments of social control and ideological domination. So there are various responses to address industrial society. Okay, ini yang tadi ada buat. Okay, so this is we look a bit at what Karl Marx said. Industrial society as the stage of capitalism. Okay, of course, Karl Marx is against capitalism. Okay, the Industrial Revolution created material foundation for capitalism. New mode of production built on factories, machines, and wage labor. They call it a historical stage in the evolution of economic systems. Okay, the hand mills gives you society with the feudal lord, the steam mill society with the industrial capitalist. Okay. So instead of you serving a feudal lord, now you are serving the capitalist. Okay. The means of production are owned by bourgeoisie, but the proletariat, the means are by the bourgeoisie, but the proletariat owns only its labor power, which is must sell for wages. If it doesn't, if he does not sell his labor or her labor, he or she will not get the wage to provide a living for him and his family. Industrial society becomes the arena where class conflict is intensified and systematized. Okay? Those who own the machine on those who work for the machine. So this is what Karl Marx said. Okay. However, Karl Marx also have a mixed view on industrial society. He noticed some positive aspect. Okay, enormous growth of productivity and science that can be unleashed out of the same material because of industrial society. Okay. Collective production, cooperation. He can see that the ills of the industrial society can be addressed by giving the control of production to society and cooperation of laborers. Okay? And he admitted that the technology offered by the industrial revolution give human mastery over nature. We can control nature in a sense. Okay? And to him, the Industrial Revolution is not all bad. It prepares ground for socialism. Okay, so the negative aspect has been covered earlier. So this is what Marx say. Okay, there is a theory raised by Thorstein Veblen the theory of the leisure class. Okay, the leisure class ni is a new class in society arising out of industrial society. These are the people, the bourgeoisie tadi yang kita kata has the means to control production, and they are not really the menial worker of the production. Okay, they might be the bosses, the managers, people who are not directly involved in the work. Okay, so these people, they don't work as much as the laborers. Okay, so Veblen critiqued the habits, or the since these people don't really have to work anymore, they need to focus their energy on something else. So conspicuous consumption is that something else, that you buy new car, you have new habits, new hats, new clothings. You can spend your money on new games. You can, start to have a leisure culture. This is what we call leisure culture. Okay, but Veblen said it, termed it as conspicuous consumption, and it is a function of social class and consumerism. Okay, and to him, it was derived from the social stratification of people, and again from the division of labor, the social institutions of the feudal period that have continued to the modern era. So during the feudal period, we have these kings and lords and owner of the land. But now, when they are no longer there, we have this class of people in post-industrial revolution, the industrial society. We have this leisure class. Okay. The pursuit and possession of wealth affects human behavior. That the contemporary lords of the manor, the businessmen who own the means of production, employ themselves in the economically unproductive practices of conspicuous consumption and conspicuous leisure, which are useless activities that contribute neither to the economy nor to the material production of the useful goods and services required for the functioning of society. Instead, it is the middle class and working class who are usefully employed in the industrialized productive occupations that support the whole society. This is what Veblen said. Okay, so how did architecture respond to the leisure class? Okay, first it became a facilitator. Architects now can design Victorian and Edwardian mansions in the 19th and 20th century, okay, to provide symbol of status, to provide symbol of class and stature for this group of people. Okay, in London and New York, a lot of these type of buildings were built. So Britain's industrial wealth created a new upper class, industrial magnate financiers, colonial elites, who displayed status through architecture rather than through aristocratic lineage. In the past, it was aristocratic, the descendant who inherit the wealth or the power of their ancestors or their progeny. But now you have this merchant class, you have this industrialists, you have this capitalists who are using this. And they use a lot of ornament, bay windows, stained glass, and complex roof line. The more intricate the design, the higher the status displayed by the owner. Okay, and also imported materials of eclectic historical styles, Gothic revival, Queen Anne Baroque, to signal taste and education. So these were the how architect responded to this leisure class. It facilitated the needs to portray symbols and conspicuous consumption. Okay, and also the rise of hotels, seaside resorts, and modernist villas catered to a more democratized leisure class in the 20th century. Okay, didn't just serve the old elite, but the new leisure seekers in a more modern context. So, even if you can imagine Frank Lloyd Wright, participate in this kind of uh, show of status. Okay, and then interestingly, you can also argue that when modernism came, it tries to redress this conspicuous consumption by introducing the modern idea of functionalism, of eh, getting rid of the symbols and ornaments, and Lee Corbusier argued for a machine for living in, and Miss Van der Rohe, less is more. Those were the spirit of the modern age, trying to get into the basic of function, efficiency, and try to get rid of all metaphysical connotation of status and symbols and meanings and whatnot. Okay. So in that sense, architecture and the leisure class uh, can be used to facilitate and also to critique the rise of the leisure class. Okay. It has been a canvas for displaying wealth and status, a tool for simplifying and democratizing leisure, and sometimes a way to challenge the values of conspicuous consumption altogether. Okay? And then we look at the counter response from the socialist aspect, architecture and socialism. Okay. Again, we go back to Marx's relevance to architecture. Marx provided not a style but a critical framework. He analyzed how economic systems shape human experience and the built environment. He viewed the city as a special manifestation of class relations, capital accumulation, producing slums, segregation, and spectacle. His ideas on alienation inspired architects to rethink how buildings could restore community, dignity, and creativity to everyday life. So, Marxism gave architecture a moral and structural lens. Buildings and cities were no longer neutral, they embodied power. So, this is something that is of concern to Marx and the socialists. Okay. Okay, I missed a photo here. Let me see. Okay, right. Okay, when we go back towards the beginning of Industrial Revolution, when we talk about the mass housing where people are crammed together. Okay, um, for the socialists, this is also an opportunity to have total planning and control, where laborers can get together, can organize themselves. Okay, using the concept of modernism, you can plan for society. That means there would be a central planning. You can organize society around a structure that decided by communal tendencies. Okay, and then this give rise to we will look at the garden city movement a bit later. Okay. Um, And here, when the workers get together, they start to negotiate for shorter working hours, reduced from 14 to 16 to around 10 hours per day. Uh, Education build the institute for the formation of character. So they really focus on education. Okay, they realize that now children are not being taught or educated by the society like in the rural time, but now they must have special school, and it is possible for the community to arrange for proper education for the children. Okay, and they fought for to fight the harsh condition of the housing estates for the workers. Architects to think about light and ventilation. At that time, those were revolutionary. Now we take for granted, we have in building by law, the size of windows, the need for ventilation and all that. Okay, and for the first time now, community can be planned around architectural planning layout. Okay. You can integrate factory, housing, school, and stores in one coherent, walkable settlement. So that this also for socialism an opportunity to organize society in a more rational and scientific way. In France, it was Charles Fourier designed what was called Phalantere. I don't know how to pronounce this. Okay, but it's a living quarters for 1,600 people living on 2,500 acres of land for both living and agriculture. So even in farming communities, they can live in concentrated structure like this. Okay, maybe now it would be too much for us to do this, but back then it was quite revolutionary. Okay, so he in the development of this building, the architect considered private and public spaces. And what is important, the courtyard that you see in this picture is actually being topped by a glass roof, so community can engage and interact uh, under whatever condition. Okay, even during rain or snow, now they can have communication. They can create that community spirit. Okay, So that was the idea back then. But nowadays, maybe the narrative would be different when you see this photo. Okay. So they had a central section, noisy wing designed for labor like carpentry and forging. So uh, activities can be planned so that people can have acceptable living condition within production facilities. Okay. And early industrial response in terms of planning was proposed by Ebenezer Howard, the Garden City movement. Okay. Um, it termed it the third magnet, where it is a solution that compromise between socialists and capitalists. Okay. Um, so it's a utopia. Um, while it drew heavily on socialist ideals of community ownership and social welfare, but also you need capitalist financial structure, which ultimately diluted his most radical visions. So, um, anyway, I think it's a bold effort to try to bring, socialist ideal and capitalist interests together. But you can read further regarding this interesting thesis. Okay, it aimed to reconcile industry, agriculture, and community, echoing Marx's call to overcome alienation. Okay, so workers would have control over the production of food and building up community and choice of work. So those were the ideas. Okay. So it's a direct response to the social ills of industrial capitalism, such as overcrowding, pollution, and poor housing. The land would be owned by the community as a whole or held in trust. Rental income would be reinvested into public services and improvements for the benefit of all residents. Social cohesion is an important part of the design to foster a strong sense of community and cooperation, with built-in provisions for cultural, recreational, and civic life in walkable, sociable neighborhoods. The utopian idealism is there. Okay, the ambition is very utopian. Okay, it is an attempt to transcend the negative aspect of both the congested city and the isolated countryside. So it's worth looking back into the idea and to see what was their concern back then and how it can be reinterpreted in modern day. Okay. Um, then industrial revolution also come in handy when uh, Britain and the countries involved in the war try to rebuild for their population. Okay, mass production, prefabrication became very handy to solve the problem of people uh, who are homeless, whose houses had been bombed, and now they need to build quick and fast. So industrialization provide industrial revolution provide that solution. You can build in prefabricated system, mass production, even you can create new towns based on the rational scientific planning, material innovation, even shift in architectural profession now. Now instead of architect design for to express the client's status and whatever requirement, but now architect has um, to balance, to coordinate, to be the integrator of the need for quick and fast housing, the need of the capitalists, and the need of the new planning requirements. So uh, architects become almost like involved in social engineering of the society. Okay, and um, then the construction industry, the rebuilding itself was being rationalized by Keynesian economic, that it justify the government to borrow from the future to create jobs, employments, and economic activities. So that was what was happening in the UK, and even in the United States after the war. Okay, the need to provide millions of housing for people also uh, requires industrial might. Okay, millions of housing need to be built within 10 years. Okay, so industrial revolution provide that, and architect has become like more like a coordinator of how to put all these this vast number of houses together. So it becomes, you can see the pattern of the industrial town even today. Okay. And after that, there is a phenomenon proposed by the American economy. It's called the American Dream. Okay, um, it is parallel with the birth of industrial capitalism. It promised prosperity, home ownership, and upward mobility, all premised on mass production, urban labor, and consumerism. Okay, Henry Ford's assembly line. Henry Ford was the manufacturer of cars, so he introduced efficiency in production by having a production line. So the suburban houses materialize that dream, because when Henry Ford have this manufacturing capability, he need to produce certain number of cars to justify the profit and the cost of investing on those factory. So the American dream sells the idea of having cars. Okay, so with the American dream houses that they sell, if the factory towns, you need cars to get around. Okay, so it create this demand for industrial market product to fill in the need of this new way of life, American dream. So the factory towns were created near production factories. Okay, mass housing, automobiles after World War II create the phenomena of suburbanization. Uh, these were all industrial product enabled by steel, concrete, fossil fuels, and Fordist mass production. Henry Ford. So this really sell the idea of single family home as the ideal, as the dream for every American. Okay. Uh, Before this, it was not such a strong idea of having a single homes with driveways with car for each house. So that the dream justify the production, justify the consumption in itself. Okay. So some people argue that it is a wishful justification. It tries to create a moral narrative of industrial society. Okay, it tried to justify the need for industrial consumption, by providing this dream. It's an emotional, it's a sentimental dreams that must be met by the people. Okay, the American dream assumes a level playing field, but systemic inequalities, racial, economic, and gender-based make upward mobility inaccessible to many. So one of the idea that was sold by the dream is upward mobility. That means if you work hard, you can own a house, you can buy one of these houses, and you will be climbing the social ladder. Okay, but it's not for everybody. Okay, success is not solely determined by merit or hard work, but by inherited privilege and social capital. So capitalist culture drives endless consumption beyond need. The narcissistic self defines success through ownership and display, and consumer desire fuels perpetual dissatisfaction and social anxiety. The middle class lives in fear of downward mobility despite material comfort. So these are the criticisms that begin to arise out of the idea of American dream. Okay, but you can relate the American dreams to what is happening to elsewhere in the world today. Okay. So let us look at some of the ideological responses towards this. Okay, one of the character that maybe should be interesting for our discussion is Thoreau. He wrote Walden in 1854, but so the key critics is loss of simplicity and spiritual freedom. He laments that the industrial society is very complicated, is very focused on surviving through wage labor to achieve this dream. Okay, industrial progress enslaves people to material comfort and speed. Thoreau argues for voluntary simplicity, to live deliberately and reject mechanical existence. Okay, so to live deliberately, it can be put like this lah. When you go to work, actually you want to survive, you want to pay for your house and for your cars, so it's a survival thing. So you must go to work because of providing those necessities. Okay, but you are not living deliberately. You are working and having those houses, and then you have to pay for the houses, for the cars by working again. So you are living in a cycle of needs, the cycle of providing for your own needs. So to live deliberately was like the life before industrial revolution, where a carpenter can decide, oh, today I don't want to produce a chair, or suddenly he feels so optimistic, I want to produce 3 chairs. So that that kind of freedom is not there anymore. Okay. And alienation from nature. The industrial economy severs human from beings from nature, leading to spiritual impoverishment. True progress is inner, not material. What is alienation from nature? In modern industrial society, you hardly need to consider nature because your food comes from the supermarket, and you work in a factory or in office that produce goods for the supermarket, for the shopping complexes. So you hardly need to even see a chicken or how people grow food. Okay, it is a joke nowadays that people, when children say chicken come from KFC or come from supermarket, because they have never seen how nature produce these essentials. Okay, and Thoreau also believed that the industrial revolution, the industrial society, is an illusion. I say that railroads or telegraphs does not do not equal civilization. Okay, tools grow faster than wisdom. So Thoreau's critique is moral and existential. Industrial society makes people efficient machines but poor souls. And then another guy named Thorsten Veblen. I have mentioned this to some of my students. The theory of the leisure class, the socioeconomic critique of capitalist modernity. Again, the critics again conspicuous consumption, technological potential versus social institutions. He saw engineers and technicians as the real drivers of progress, but their creativity is constrained by business interests. Industrial production is subordinated to profit, not collective welfare. And he also lamented the idea of machine HRNE. Although the machine promises efficiency and rational organization, it produces irrational social outcomes, alienation, inequality, and the fetish of status. In short, Veblen exposed the contradiction of industrial capitalism, a rational machine system run by rational social values of prestige and profit. So another critique that we might be of interest for us is the one-dimensional man by Herbert Marcuse. So he critiques technological rationality as domination. He argued that technology in industrial society becomes an instrument of social control. Okay, and he says that the industrial society has one-dimensional thinking. It suppresses negative critical thinking, turning citizens into consumers satisfied with false needs, and false freedom and repressive tolerance, liberation through aesthetic and radical imagination. In short, Marcuse saw industrial society as a totalitarian in subtle form. Okay, um, so these are the differences between the three. There's another critic called Mark Fisher. He talks about capitalist realism. He said that now capitalism has been entrenched in society. It has entered into the domain of psychology and culture. Okay, now look at the positive aspect of it. How did architecture responded to this criticism? Okay, so there are an environmental response, societal response. Okay, that being proposed by architects and thinkers alike. Okay. One of the early reaction against industrial revolution or industrial society is uh, the arts and crafts movement. This is a very old movement led by William Morris and Ruskin. Architecture students should have read about this. Okay, they identified the crisis of meaning and beauty caused by industrial capitalism, because when they look at the industrial production of a chair coming out of factory, there is no beauty, there is no craftsmanship, there is no care given by a craftsman anymore. Okay? So they went as so far to go back to handmade production, celebrating the dignity and creativity of craftsmen. So instead of labor, mindless labor, he exalted the craftsmen. These people really have the magic of introducing beauty and meaning to the life of ordinary people. Okay, art is man's expression of his joy in labor, said John Ruskin. Okay, it emphasis on simplicity and vernacular forms, use of local material, brick, timber, stone. Okay, does not use steel or nowadays we call metal cladding. Those industrial product is not good for them. Okay, and even Frank Lloyd Wright and the Bauhaus were also influenced by this movement. Okay, but we look at Bauhaus. Bauhaus embraced modernity. They embrace the industrial production, but they believe that art, craft, and machine can work together to produce humanized product, buildings, and culture. Okay, so the idea is to integrate art industry. Mass production can be designed. For example, the chair proposed there. Okay, uh, those can come out of a factory, but it has certain elegance to it. Beauty can come out of it if the designer think of how it can meet the three criteria of design. Apa ni, Venustas, Firmitas, Utilitas, aesthetic, function, and strength can be met with modern industry. Okay. Um, Honesty and functionality. The words architectonic, how building are honest, buildings are honest about the way it was constructed. You can see the column. You can see how beams and column are joined together. So honesty in structure, in even in function, form follow function. Okay, so the building in Dessau, Bauhaus building itself is a manifestation of this idea. Okay, the belief in technology and modernity, but which can be infused with human creativity and craftsmanship. Also, early in the modern movement, there were architects who are concerned with meaning. Okay, Alvar Aalto was one of them. He was called the humanist of modernism. He responded to the loss of meaning in modern architecture. Remember the photo of the Villa Savoy and Farnsworth House of Mies van der Rohe I showed earlier? Alvar Aalto think it was too much. People still need to have relationship with the materials, with the memory of structure that they used to live in and they used to know. So uh, it was the approach of infusing humanist architecture into modernism. Okay, so in short, he was trying to rehumanize modern architecture. In response to the houses, social housing for the factory workers, there was a movement called co-housing. Okay, co-housing is a community-driven housing project. Okay, it's another response to industrial society. It originated in Denmark. It tried to counter social fragmentation, challenges industrial urbanism by fostering intentional neighborhoods. Intentional neighborhoods, that means people came together into a neighborhood because they want to be there, not because they were driven by economic needs or they were driven by their profession or whatsoever. That the people want to live together. Okay, so it balances privacy and community. It combines private home with shared spaces, kitchen, gardens, and workshop. They believe that this interaction between people who wants to live together will create meaning in their life. It rejects profit-driven housing, emphasizes collective design, non-speculative ownership, and long-term stewardship. And also, it tried to break the barriers, Desilo, between living, working, and leisure in walkable human-scale environments. It encourages participation. The design was, driven by the residents themselves. They were the people who manage and maintain their community. Okay, reversing the industrial passivity where it was controlled by the managers or the boss or the head of the complex. Okay, it promotes ecological living, integrates energy efficiency, shared resources, and sustainability and mobility. So it embodies post-industrial values, cooperation, connection, and meaning over consumption and scale. Okay. And there is another similar movement called intentional community. An intentional community is a group of people who live together or share common facilities and who regularly associate with each other on the basis of explicit common values. Okay, a lot of this can be found in the USA. Okay, you can look them up. Okay, where people organize their resources to purchase certain amount of land, and they plan their houses, their work, their agriculture, their food production together. It's called intentional community. Okay, so it rejects mass individualism, counter industrial society's isolation and competition by restoring communal living. It reclaims social bonds based on cooperative groups where sharing replaces consumption. It resists capitalist urbanism. It offers alternatives to market-driven cities through collective ownership and self-governance. It integrates work and life, dissolve industrial separation of labor, home, and leisure into holistic daily life. It tries to desilo again these various aspects of our daily living into a cohesive living experience. Okay, ecological architecture, ecological system is the core of driver of their way of uh, production. Okay, talks about moral and spiritual meaning. Okay, it's also a prototype of post-industrial society. Okay, it's almost similar like co-housing, but maybe the differences can be seen from this table here. Okay, uh, um, for example, in responding to industrial society, the co-housing seeks to reform urban housing, but the intentional community they want to escape or replace industrial capitalists entirely. Okay, so you can look in detail of this comparison. That I will share the slides with the students. Okay. And then responding to environmental concern, we have green movements. People start to talk about energy efficiency, low energy building, even wastewater recycling. Okay, these begin in the 70s. They try to address the side effect of industrial consumption, industrial production. Okay, so they tend to produce their own energy, local materials, and low ambient energy. Again, social and communal living is also a theme, and we can see that this trend runs across all the previous counter movement. Compact, walkable neighborhood, encouraging interaction and car-free mobility, reducing commuting distance. Even here, they don't encourage you to buy cars. Instead, they have a collection of car fleet owned by the community as a whole. So if you want to use a car, you just inform the management, I need a car to go maybe out of town during the weekend. Then you can you can rent, pay for a nominal fee. You can use the car. Okay, it belongs to the community. Mixed housing and offices reduce commuting distance and respond to industrial separation of work and home. Okay. Another interesting response can be seen by this guy here, Francis Kere. He's an African. He is from Burkina Faso. Okay, he's an architect. He studied in Europe. Okay. There, the need for development is not necessarily a direct counter response to industrial society. It was driven by necessity. In his country, materials, technology, access to machines is very, very minimal. So he has to employ whatever is available at the place of the construction, employing local labor, using their local hand to produce the bricks, to work, and also the material are locally resourced. Okay, so it almost sounds like it's the ideal green architecture. And also he realized the social function of architecture. It restores the link between architecture, people, and place through participatory building. So the school, the above is the school that he built in one of the villages. So it was built by the villagers themselves. Okay, so they have this sense of belonging. They have this sense of responsibility over the education of the community as a whole. Okay, Climate and autonomy. Design strategies rely on passive design. This is, of course, it's very difficult for them to get electrical power and so on and so forth. So even might be expensive for them. So they have to rely on passive architecture. Okay, and the issue of culture and ethical dimension is very important. So identity, pride, and learning, because of the people themselves, sometimes using their own apa tu, craft skill to help putting touches to the building, that they really feel the culture survives with the manifestation of the building. Okay. An interesting response to industrial um, construction is proposed by this guy. His name is Walter Siegel. Siegel, his method is called Siegel method. He focused on self-build. So the story goes, he happened to have uh, to need to build a temporary house for himself and his family while his main house is under renovation. But he didn't want to build a temporary house that at the end you have to demolish and you cannot do anything about it. So he designed a system of construction where materials are used in their original form when they were bought from the hardware store. Okay, so the intention was at the end of his stay, maybe for 1 year or 6 months, the house can be dismantled and the materials can be reused or resell to other people. But eventually, the house was so nice that he kept the house and it became a new method of construction because it used dry construction technique, timber, and bolts. So he designed it so simple that he can provide a manual for anybody who has the access to this manual can build their own homes. So one thing of one of the things that come out of this is that he see the potential of provide people providing homes for themselves instead of relying on the industrial capitalists providing mass housing. People can get together and they can use this technique, work as a community, and build for themselves. So he had built a couple of this self-built development around London. Okay, the photos on the bottom there is the one of the housing in London. It looks like a tropical climate. It doesn't look like London, at all. So this gave rise to self-build movement led by community rather than a developer. Okay, and we also heard nowadays of tiny living, people trying to get away from industrial access, who are seeking economic freedom. They don't want to spend the rest of their life paying for their house. Okay, and normally these people are very adept at DIY skills. They can build stairs, shelves, even the whole house themselves. Given the right tools. Okay, because of its tininess, it has small footprints, use less energy, and it can provide. You can start to provide for yourself even in terms of food if you have extra land for food production. Okay, restores human scale. You can see that the size really relates to the minimum size to accommodate a human. Okay, so redefines technology. So with the right tools, there is no need for mass production. Again, it embodies post-industrial values. Okay. And also people talk about off-grid living, rejection of dependence on centralized system, reclaiming autonomy and resilience, critique of overconsumption, integration with nature. Okay, so one of the example is the Earthship by Michael Reynolds. You can read about this. He tried to live without the need to tap into the um, national grid, even the national cycle of supply and demand of food, material, construction materials, so on and so forth. So some of the counter movements that embodied the whole integrated idea of new way of organizing society in post-industrial revolution. Okay, one of it is the Venus Project, founded by Jacques Fresco and Roseanne Meadows in 1995, introduced the idea of resource-based economy. One thing that we should know that our economy now is based on growth. Uh, so growth does not consider what is the resource needed for growth. So the Venus Project says that you must really understand what kind of resource available to you. Okay, so it talks about new way of organizing your civilization. One thing about the Venus Project, it relies so much on technology. He believed that technology can solve uh, the civilizational need for the future. Okay, believe in science, okay, and futuristic urban design, and also is a critique of capitalism, because inequality, waste, ecological degradation is the outcome of capitalism. So he said that any society which produce this is not worth living in. So you can go into detail by looking up into this project. Okay. And then in 2010, there was a movement called Solar Punk. Solar Punk is more like it was an imaginary movement. Okay? It talks about arts, and it conveys the idea through storytelling, ecological innovation. So it rejects industrial alienation again. It celebrates ecological technology again. Solar Punk believe in technology, green technology, to say, and that address the issue of ecology, so on and so forth. Um, it promotes decentralized communities. Communities should be able to cater to provide for themselves, to handle the waste themselves, without having to have a globalized economy. Okay. It believes in art to inspire people to live responsibly. Okay, and believes in grassroots transformation. So begins from the culture, the community itself. In a way, it learns from traditional communities where they really rely on the ecological system to survive. Okay. Another one is the Zeitgeist movement by Peter Joseph. Okay. It in a way is extension of the Venus Project, uh, but it focuses on activism, education, and educating the public about the need to have a society that is free from industrial society. The bad things about industrial society. It's also again a critique of industrial capitalism. It focuses on awareness, and he believes, unlike Solar Punk, the movement believe of global connection. We must understand resources really well, between various communities in the world to help each other. Okay. Socio-economic activism uses documentaries, lectures. Peter Joseph is still active he has a YouTube channel. If you look at his channel, but the channel now, I think the name is Revolution Now, something like that. Okay, but these are the three movements that try to look at how to counter what are the alternative to industrial society that we have today. Okay. So to conclude the talk, okay, architecture does not happen in a vacuum. It reflects the changing dynamics of culture, economy, politics, technology, and ideology. It dances with the industrial society of multiple dances. At certain times, it can be the facilitator. Sometimes it can be the critic. Sometimes it can address a new solution. Okay, so you as an architecture student, this is the time for you to explore the various possibilities of how to respond to the critique of industrial society. Okay, it assists in the dialectic between capitalism and socialism and their counter responses. It is not merely being a backdrop, but at times become the instrument, the instigator, and the counter forces. So that is the end of my talk. Uh, Now, perhaps if anybody has any question, anybody has any question? That question. Um, it is important for all of you, no matter whatever thesis you are trying to do, to understand the grand narrative of human evolution, especially post-industrial revolution, to see the different ideas that you produce. Some of your ideas might have been uh, been raised by the responses that I showed earlier, but you might have new ideas. Okay, you can contribute into the discussion. Your project might have some bearings on some of the issues raised in this lecture. Okay, so no question, eh? Okay, good. Not good actually. I hope it gives you some ideas to think about how to approach your thesis from this point onward. Okay, and hopefully it will help you in some ways for you to position your thesis. Okay, um, and have a good uh, perspective, have a good foundation. So when you come up with a schematic proposition in the coming weeks, you will have covered these issues. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention. I know it's late in the afternoon. Everybody is uh, willing to go off very soon. So see you next Monday. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much.